We are so pleased for part 3 of Theology from the Margins to have Reverend Elder Dr. Carmen Margarita Sánchez De León with us here today. So I'm going to give a brief biography. Not everyone may have seen the biography, so just want to share with you that Reverend Elder Sánchez De León served as pastor for Metropolitan Community Church congregations in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and London, and now lives in Mexico City, and was coordinator of critical studies of gender and theology at Comunidad Teológica de Mexico. Her degrees are from the University of Puerto Rico, the Evangelical Seminary of Puerto Rico, and the Graduate Theological Foundation with a PhD in Gender Critical Studies. She also served as Executive Director of Amnesty International of Puerto Rico and is the recipient of the 1998 Stonewall Award of the Anderson Prize Foundation. The Council of Elders is so pleased to have Reverend Elder Sánchez De León as our lecturer today. Just a reminder, a quick reminder that part 4 is coming up in 2 weeks. We'll have Professor Kakai Pamaran with us, and an individual poster will be going out, but it's also on the poster that features all 4 lecturers. So stay tuned for part 4 also. So if we could please give a warm welcome to Reverend Elder Dr. Sánchez De León. Welcome, welcome.
Yay. Well, thanks a lot. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Thanks a lot for welcoming me in this space that I consider that is a holy space, to be with you, with friends that I have been for a long time. Velma, I am so glad to see you again. A lot of hugs and kisses, and Caroline too. I remember very well. We have wonderful conversations in the past, and Reverend Goody, thanks a lot to all of you. Really, thank you for having me here. It is an honor and a pleasure to be at home. So thank you. And also in this conversation that we are going to have, my dear Mike will be helping me with the presentation, with the PowerPoint. And Mike, do you have ready the presentation so that we could start with this conversation? And of course, the thing that I think that would be more important in this process will be, of course, the conversation that will follow this morning of dialogues between friends. And saying that, please allow me a little bit to begin this reflection by situating my body and by situating my experience, and explain in a certain way from where my knowledge comes from. Well, for many years, I have been myself as a Caribbean, Black, queer woman that has lived most of her life in a space colonized for more than 500 years by 2 imperial powers, Spain and the United States of America. At the moment, and Mike, you could show the next slides, please. At the moment, I am an immigrant in Mexico with a regularized migratory status, which definitely give me a privileged position in a country where migrants are continuously victims of the migratory policies developed by the United States of America as well as in Mexico. I live as a migrant in a country where the faces of migrants are now becoming more and more darker because of the displacement of Black communities, the Garifuna people from Central America, the displacements of the forgotten people from the forgotten land of Haiti, and the displacements from people across the Atlantic in Africa. All those displacements has increased. I have lived in political contexts, both in Puerto Rico and Mexico, where the systemic racism is denied, it is masked and hidden. But I am also I will say, traversed by other realities of the space that I inhabit and spaces that I call home. Mexico, for me, is home at this moment. But I would like to tell you some realities of Mexico that I will say that cross my heart, cross my body. First, the United Nations Working Group of Enforced or Involuntary Disappearance reported that until 2022, more than 100,000 people are recognized as missing, disappeared in Mexico. That numbers records the disappearance of I will say, the last 58 years. Although it is important to remember that 97% of that figure refers to cases after 2006. It is a tragedy of unbelievable proportions, framed in a context of total impunity. The other situation is that according to Transgender Europe, according to that NGO, Mexico was the second country with most murders of trans people in 2022. By the way, the first is Brazil. In addition, the National Citizen Observatory of Feminicide indicates that between 10 and 11 women, we can pass to the next slides, please. Between 10 and 11 women are murdered every day in Mexico. A figure that it is not only, I will say, alarming, but also comes with a scandalous level of impunity. Please, the next. Those are basically these slides show you most of the a manifestation of basically women that are mothers or sisters or wife or people that have disappeared. That is a very constant situation, a regular situation in Mexico. And unfortunately, the system called those women the crazy women because they are seekers of their beloved one. Please, the next slide. Those are some of the protests that we have there. People crying and wondering where the bodies of their beloveds are. Next one, please. That is a very, I will say, a very special manifestation of trans people to demonstrate the situation of killing of trans people in Mexico. That event was in Mexico City. The next, please. And that is a manifestation of and a protest about feminicides in Mexico. That it is so regular, all of those violence that have been in many sense, I could say, normalized. And that reality inhabits me, across my body and my identities. Those identities have been imposed by the system on me, and in many ways, with the help of communities, I have resignified those identities. And why do I begin to talk about this? Because probably, as you remember, Black feminists and what were called in the 80s of the last centuries, feminists of color, have pointed out very early the importance of what I am going to call situated knowledge, the standpoint of view. And they have pointed that because they have said that the standpoint of view from Black women, from women of color, is a privileged point of view. And it is important because it helps us to understand in many ways, to understand what MCC affirms, that there are no closed truth and not objective truth. For those who do theology from the margins, situated knowledge has the importance of making us understand that dogmas must be viewed with suspicions. Please, the next slide. You're seeing there the thinker Patricia Hill Collins, and she's one of the Black feminists that have helped us to understand the standpoint of view of Black women as a privilege way of understanding reality. And later on, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Because the second thing that I think that we should bear in mind, why this knowledge coming from Black women, from women of colors, from the margin, is so privileged, is because help us to break with the hegemonic narrative that are constructed from the power of this that is in the center. This hegemonic narrative have the function of keeping the systems of oppression in place, and of course, to justify them. From the margins, Black women and those in the margin live and build counter narratives that contradicts and subvert the truth that we have assumed, because that is a very important point of view. And it's a very important knowledge that we get from there, from the margins. On the other hand, living, learning, and feeling from the margins give us the opportunity to understand why systemic violence cannot be dealt with in a separate way. From my point of view, each of the violence that I already have mentioned here are produced or are products of an interconnected matrix of oppression: patriarchy, heteronormativity, racism, capitalism, were intertwined as part of the colonial and modern projects. Orthodox Christianity, as a way of thinking and as a way of living, was and is participant in the construction of this matrix of oppression. And Christianity, which in the origins was very rich and diverse, and we could say that in some way was promiscuous movement, just finished and says it to be a space of dialogue, to become into a machinery of homogenization. While it is true that during the Middle Age in the Iberian Peninsula, there were, I will say, diverse cultural spaces, it is also true that the division between Islam, Judaism, and Christianity create conditions for the emergence of a proto-racial discourse in the light of the policies of forced conversion imposed by the religious hierarchy and by the institution of monarchy. And this is important because this was the laboratory that creates the process of racialization, racial hierarchies that will acquire, I will say, various forms through the process of conquest of the territory that now we call Las Americas. And that I prefer to call instead of Las Americas to honor the native people and to recognize the land of those who came before. I prefer to call this territory Abjayala. That is the name that the people from the Guna Dule communities give to all Central, what we call Central America and the South, and the island of the turtle, that it was the name of some native people gave to what we call North America. So that process of colonization was the laboratory that create not only the hierarchies of racialization and, as a matter of fact, the concept of race, but it was also the laboratory that will forge the ideologies about gender and sexuality linked to racial hierarchies. This function within what scholars such as Aníbal Quijano, that was a Peruvian thinker, and Maria Lugones from Argentina will call the coloniality of power. And we are still living in that system, the coloniality of power. The coloniality is a system of power linked to modernity, that through the process of conquest, colonization, have become into a global system. Colonization and later coloniality of power reconfigures basic elements of life, such as, I will say, gender relationships, sexuality, labor, knowledge, also create, as I was saying, the concept of race. And the other thing that process created was and invented was the political concept of Africa, America, Asia, the Orient, and as well as the concept of the West. In the process of creating the concept of race and created geopolitical spaces, Europeans just deshumanize many people, many people that were living in those places that were conquest. And also, I will say that something that I call the genocide of knowledge happened. There was an intentional genocide, not only of people, but the genocide of knowledge and culture. And this process of dehumanization lasted even after the independence of the colonies. We can pass to the next slides. And that's Marta Lugones from Argentina. That is one of the main thinkers of this, what I am explaining to you, that is the coloniality of power. And this process of dehumanization not only prevails during the conquest, during the process of the colonization, but was part of the new states. Because this process become, as I will say, a process of a civilizing experiment that was done by the new states that were established as a process of, as a consequence of the independence struggles. Though we can say that our countries in Latin America, because of that, we can say that in our countries in Latin America and the Caribbean are impregnated by a colonial legacy. And that is what we call the coloniality of power. And that legacy, it is also true in the United States, in Canada, and it have a global consequence. From the racialization of the division of labor and gender and binary categories, and the creation, of course, of national borders, because nationalities, the nation is a concept created in what we call the modern epoch, in the modern period. Those hierarchies those processes establish hierarchies where the dominance becomes what I will say the norm, and the rest becomes invisible, dangerous, or marginal. And Maria Lugones, inspired by the works of Paula Gon Allen, that is a woman thinker from the Sioux Nation, and inspired by the work also of Oyeronke Oyewumi, that it is a woman philosopher from Nigeria. She points out that the category of gender and race have an impact, a particular impact on the process of dehumanization of non-white racialized women in Latin America and the Caribbean. Gon Allen, for example, states that in the communities of Native people, the division of labor, for example, was not defined by male and female, that binary categories. There were other parameters, such as imagine as dreams, visions. Because of that, gender relationships were more complex and non-binary. This cultural structure was destroyed by the colonial, religious, and the political institution in the new national states. In this process of imposition and cultural genocide, those assigned and rated as men only received power if they acted congruent with the authoritarian and punitive model of the colonial system. On the other hand, Oyeronke Oyewumi demonstrate in a marvelous book that she wrote, that the name of the book is The Invention of Women. And she made her research in the Yoruba culture. And the Yoruba culture is one of the people more representative among the enslaved people that came to the place that we call America's continent, an island. In the Yoruba culture, gender was not the organizing principle of these societies. the assumption that gender system existed in Oyo society prior to Western colonization is part of an imposition of an interpretation of the world facilitated by the dominance of the West. Maria Lugones affirms, and using all those studies made by Gonalen and Oyeronke Oyewumi, she affirms that sexual dimorphism served and serves Eurocentric global capitalist exploitation and domination. According to Lugones, one of the first achievements of the colonial state was the creation of women as a category. And I will say, from my part, I will say, and the category of unwomen, not women, for racialized women. And there are a lot of evidence of how enslaved women were categorized as animals and worms for commodities production. And this classification was extended in the post-slavery period through the demonization, the hypersexualization of racialized women. And that's the truth in this, also in this moment. And that's what Lugones is saying. In this complex oppressive framework that Lugones calls gender modern colonial system, heterosexuality is obligatory and is constructed as a normative that permeates the totality of coloniality. Well, unfortunately, Christian theology has served to create the narrative that sustains the coloniality of power, and with it, oppressive systems such as racialization and heteronormative patriarchal capitalism. Christian theology has been what I call a homogenizing machine, responsible for religious genocide and responsible for the disarticulation of other ways of seeing and understanding life. When Marcela Althaus Rey, that probably all of you know her, Marcela was from Argentina, a very important theologian from the South. When Marcela Althaus Rey called for an indecent theology, she was expressing, in my opinion, a deep frustration with the theologies of liberation that didn't leave behind the models of interpretations that were basically Eurocentric models of interpretation. That, as a matter of fact, are still the models that are taught in our seminaries. And because of that, therefore, the theology of liberation never left behind totally the coloniality of power. Without this, or with these situations, the theologies could not reach deeply, deeply on the matrix of operation. Because, and I will like to mention Audre Lorde, please, the next slide. Audre Lorde, a Black lesbian feminist and poet that born in USA, but with her parents were from the Caribbean. Audre Lorde argues that one cannot dismantle the master house with the master tools. And in the structure of theology, in general, that's what it is happening. We are trying to dismantle the master house with the master tools. Marcela calls us for a theology of the whole body, with genitalia, with sex and sexuality. And she alerts us that theological concepts about sexuality and the body are part of the colonial construction that still inhabits among us. And that from there, the politics of control of the bodies are built from there. For her, for Marcela, the solution is that the theological thinking and theological work and theological practice should be done and live in and with the marginal bodies. Sign these bodies dismantle the hegemonic narrative that have served to oppress and control the bodies. These bodies that are marginal are queer, but it's queer and queerness here is a huge umbrella in her thinking. Queer are what Judith Butler will say, abject bodies, bodies that contradicts the normative. And it's from there that Marcela Althaus-Rey twists the traditional theological concept. For me, the queerness of body is not only about gender identity, sexuality identity, but rather queerness is part of all of those bodies that are part of the center, that are not part of the norms established by the matrix of operation. I would like to revisit the term that you have proposed about theology from the margins. And I would like to revisit and talk a little bit about margins and borderlines. Marginality is the place where a hegemonic power put or place that which they cannot control. And they cannot control it because those threaten the normative narrative. Although I will say that the margins is a place, even when I say that, it is also a non-place. It is a non-place because from the center of power, the marginal is erased, denied, and made non-existence. Even the occupants of that non-place are denied their human status. It's a process of dehumanizing in many different ways. But at the same time, the marginal, the border, is a space to generate new knowledge, new ways of being, resignifying the imposed identities. It is from this marginality that we resignify the words Black, queer, women, and other from the margin. The space that the center have fear of. The Chicana thinker, Gloria Anzaldúa, has led us to revisit the borders. And she used for that the concept that it is called Nepantla. We could pass to the next slides, please. Nepantla is a Nahuatl word, Nahuatl from native people from Mexico. That word means the land in between, or space in between. That's Nepantla. And as Chicana, Gloria Anzaldúa, she literally lived on the borders between what we call Mexico and the United States of America. And this border has a history of various conquest and colonial violence. And as a queer woman herself, Anzaldúa struggled against the system of heteronormativity in her own community and against racism and the coloniality of power in the context of the Southern United States of America. For Anzaldúa, the border, the marginality is home, his home, and at the same time, a space of terrifying violence. Nepantla is a space unstable, unpredictable, precarious, and always in transition, without clear limits. And it is precisely from these precarious spaces with queer bodies, Black bodies, queer bodies are Black bodies, migrant with irregular status, women, gender diversity. It is with those queer bodies and in those precarious spaces that we must develop theologies that help us to dismantle the matrix of oppression, the coloniality of power. In the month of May, I had the opportunity to share with people from different places of Mexico, and we gathered in Guadalajara, and it was people that came from different struggles and resistance. Some were committed with finding the missing people. Others were committed with the sustainable economies. Others were committed with the defense of the territory for indigenous community. Others were struggling and committed with people of gender diversity. Again, other were working with against feminicides, and it were different struggles represented there. But we all agree that our struggles cannot occur in isolation. And also we agree that the border and the marginal give us the opportunity to create unsuspected alliances that will help us to crack, to break the matrix of oppression. Those of us, my friends, who theologize, we have it very difficult because most of the present theological knowledge was constructed by modernity and by the coloniality of knowledge and power. So we are left to, I will say, reimagine theology, which perhaps should not only be indecent, but should dare to travel through totally uncertain spaces like Nepantla, that takes us to other unimaginable places, where even that which we have defined as divinity does not dare to enter. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Elder Sánchez De León. If we could have a few moments for questions. I have many pages of notes here, but we do want to open it up to see if there are any questions. I had never heard the phrase genocide of knowledge, and I appreciated thinking of it, and so that I've been thinking of it as you continued to speak. And then you talked about how the border, la frontera, the border is where is the space to generate new knowledge. So how exciting, but also how exhilarating, but also how intimidating. That how do we start to do that? How do we continue to do that? Have we started that as MCC? How do we continue to do that as MCC?
Is that a question for me, or it is?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh wow, this is great. I could see new people that I really love. Kathy, Alexander, wow. So great to see you. And well, yes, and I also see Nilsa. Wow, excellent. many lovely people here. And well, thanks a lot, and for that question. Wow. in many ways, we have started doing that in MCC. When we embrace what the concepts of what Marcela Altaus Rey was talking about, the body, and to put the body in the center of the methodology for doing our theology, we are doing that. But I wonder, that's a question for you guys. I'm not going to answer totally. I wonder if sometimes in doing that process of putting the body, and particularly the sexuality and the issue of gender, we forgot about other stuff. I wonder. And those are the stuff, those are the things that are really important to the body, cross things as race, for example, cross things as where the people live, in terms of identifying if we as MCC have been using structure of the coloniality of power. And that's something that we need to reflect about. Because honestly, most of us that have the experience of studied in a seminary, that have the privilege and the experience of studying in a seminary, all of us were formed in a way of thinking that is Eurocentric. The question is, how much and how many of other structure of theology we have into in our thinking? African theology, Native American theology, Native theology from the natives of Australia, New Zealand, from the Pacific. How many of that we have rescued and put it in our way of doing theology? And you know, it's like a kind of, I would say, an archaeology work, because most of that spiritual structures, spiritual thinking have been destroyed by colonial powers. And that's a very important thing that we need to recognize. It was a genocide. And we still have experienced it, for example, in countries like Brazil, that still have a lot and important of African matrix spirituality. Those spirituality have been persecuted at this moment that I am talking. They have been persecuted by Christianity. And in a certain way, in MCC, we are afraid of that. In many ways, we would like to, we are Christian-centered, and what that means, it's just a question that I think that we need to revisit it and to talk about.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Are there any other questions? I don't want to be the only one asking questions. I want to make sure that I see. Are there any questions? Yes, I see. Carolyn has a hand up. Elder
Thank you.
Carolyn.
No problem. Thank you. I have to say my mind is blown, but at the same time, I resonate with so much of what you said. Terms that I hadn't come up with, I recognize as real and accurate, like cultural genocide. You know, the whole thing about sexuality being, well, Black bodies being dehumanized. We've known that in America since before the years of enslavement, but we certainly understand now in this day and age in the US, how quickly people want to re-enslave anybody dark, brown, or Black, or doesn't speak English. You know, that's the problem. Within MCC, we did make a good start. We have made a good start, but it's not enough. And unless we can get back to some things, that were good tools to help dismantle the master's house, it's not going to ever get dismantled. And you're right about theology. We can't use the language of traditional theology. It just doesn't work. And so I'm praying that we can get brave, and that within MCC somewhere there will be a re-emergence of white people healing racism, because they're the ones that's got to heal it. I can't heal racism. Neither can you or anyone who is not benefiting from the dominant culture. I mean, in a way, all of us who live in America, even Black people, to some extent benefit from this culture, because we know if you get a check on the first of the month, or if whatever, it's my Social Security, my God, that's the same deal. We have to figure out how to do better. And we have to start with ourselves, ridding MCC of racism that is not far from what Trumpism looks like. So that's all I got to say. But thank you, my elder. I appreciate you so much. And I was thrilled when I saw your picture on the poster. Thank you for doing this for all of us.
Carolyn, it's so great to see you again and to have this opportunity to be with you and at this moment. And you know, I would like to add very quickly that these times have been like it's like an empantre on certain places, pushing us in on a certain place. This moment, and I am saying that basically because I don't know if I probably you know this, but there are many organizations currently, NGOs that are struggling because they realize that they need to make deep structural changes. And I am talking about very well-known organizations of human rights that are working, trying to figure it out. They have discovered, wow, we have been organization of human rights for so many years, but we still have sexism, and we still have colonialism among us, and we still have racism among us. What were you going to do with that? And now what it is happening is many of those organizations, and I would like to mention just one example, Oxfam, that is a very well-known organization. They are figuring out, they are trying to think, okay, how we are going to become into anti-racist and feminist organization and a decolonized organization. What is great for me is that we have started talking about the matrix of oppression. For me, that's very powerful. So thanks a lot, Carol. Thanks a lot.
I think I see Scotty with a hand up. You are muted.
Yeah, I had a similar mind-blowing experience there from Carolyn. Yeah, it's really hard for me to talk about spiritual things, since that almost there's no words around my spirituality, which makes it really hard sometimes in the pulpit. But what I really would like MCC to be challenged, especially by what you left us with, was what is Christianity? Because, you know, as a white person doing theology in church, occasionally I will look over in my hand of the work I'm doing and realize, oh, that's the master's tool in my hand. And I have to recognize that that's true. And then I have to, if I put that down, I have to go, what other tools are there to use? And what tools does MCC give me to do this work? And who is asking these questions? And where do I go as a white person? Because one of the things that happens to white people who are with white people, I have come to find that we are not trustworthy to do the work of anti-racism alone.
Mhm.
We really need to be in community with our BIPOC siblings and sit and listen in moments like this, so that when we go back to do the work, we don't find that, or maybe we learn how to do, until we find that answer, how do we talk about these things that is Christianity? I think that we still really haven't dealt with the issue of baptism
Mhm.
and what that means and how that affects us in all these different ways.
Yeah.
So I guess what I would like to sort of posit in that is can we as a denomination that's always pushing ourselves, we're always on the tip of the spear, how do we challenge ourselves to look at what Christianity is as MCC lives it out as functioning or acting clergy in the world as we lead.
Mhm.
That makes
Thanks,
sense.
Reverend. Thanks a lot. A pleasure to hear your point of view. And you said something really powerful. That's the work of our community. This is something that we cannot do alone. We need to have serious conversation. And within community, we can find the way of new things. And MCC have been a place of experiment, of new language, of liturgy. Let's continue doing, breaking the models that we learn of how to do liturgy, for example. Let's continue thinking about what are important things that we should be involved with. Let's continue thinking in community. In community. We have done a lot of stuff in the past that we need to continue working with and going more deeply together, because this is something that we cannot do alone. I am pretty sure about that.
Thank you so much. I am aware we've gone over our hour time, and I do want to be respectful of our lecturers' time and the time of people here on this call. If there's one brief question left, we could do that. If there's any, the questions I have are very long and involved.
Well, if it's useful for you, I can send to Reverend Gody the paper with bibliography.
Yes.
Yes. So
Yes.
that if that's helpful, I will be more than happy to do that, and to continue working with you with this, of course. We need to do this together. That's the thing. It is very challenging, and I will say that for me, I will talk with my body and my mind and for me, what have served to me is to be humble in a way of thinking that I am still learning. I am still learning. I am still changing. I'm still becoming in. And that's what we need to understand. MCC, it is still a place of creating and a pantla. Let's not be afraid of being in the margins. The margin is power, is opportunity to create new things.
I just got a Holy Spirit shiver while
Me
you
too.
were speaking. Praise be to God. The MCC is still creating, and the margins are a place of power. That is such a good word that I won't speak for everyone. Such a good word that I needed to hear tonight, and I am grateful beyond words for your time, for your wisdom, for us here tonight, Reverend Elder Sanchez De León. Thank you so much. And I will distribute your words to the group. And thank you to all of you. Remember, we have one more part 4 coming up on August 16th for a lot of people. That's at 8 a.m. Eastern time. It'll be 8 p.m. Philippines time with Professor Kakai Pamaran. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful
you.
rest of your day, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
everyone.
Take care.
Blessings.
Love you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for coming
Bye.
so
Bye-bye.
much. Good to see new people
Good night.
too. God
you
bless.
all. Bye-bye.
Wonderful.
Right.
Bye.
Make it a great
Pray
rest of the
for
week.
all.
Hump day.